Financial Update with First Community Bank, live every fourth Thursday of the month on WLIJ and podcasted on Facebook. Join guests from First Community Bank and our host as they inform, educate, and encourage you on all things finances. First Community Bank is a member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. Now, here's your host. Well, good morning to you. This is Chase Clanton, your host, and we're on the Financial Update with First Community Bank. Today, I am joined by the Executive Vice President, BSA Compliance Officer, Nicole Simmons. Nicole, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So before we jump straight in and talk about all the informative news and ideas that we want to discuss on today's show, I'd like to hear a little bit about your background and let the listeners know where you came from, how you got to Tennessee here, and what you do at the bank.
Sure. So I was a lifelong Illinoisan.
Illinoisan.
Yeah. I'm from the Chicagoland area. Grew up there, went to school there, and never really thought about leaving until the pandemic. And, at that time, I think a lot of us were assessing kind of just where life was and what we wanted. Yeah. And one day I woke up and I asked my then boyfriend, hey, if I want to move to Tennessee, would you want to go with? And he said, sure. So
there you go.
Yeah. So I think it was a couple months later, we made our first weekend trip out and started looking around. And then a couple months after that, we found a house and we just decided to move together. And now he is my husband. And so it's all working out. We live in Murfreesboro. And and so, at that time I was working for a big bank and I was remote. So I just thought that's how things were going to continue. And then they decided to return to office, and that was going to be quite the commute back to Chicago.
Yeah, we don't want to take a commercial airline every morning to go to work.
Yeah, so I started, looking around, and I was able to find the opportunity with First Community, and I interviewed with Scott and Daniel there. And and so it was just a really good fit. I had a lot of banking experience. I used to be a consultant, so I worked in a lot of big banks, and so I was kind of used to that, just coming in and assessing things. And it'll be 3 years in January that I've been at the bank.
3 years. I was going to ask how long it's been.
Yeah. So I started at the bank about maybe 6 weeks after I moved to Tennessee.
Oh, wow. It's pretty fast.
Yeah. It all worked out real great, timing-wise for everything. And so, it's a little easier to commute than back to Chicago.
Yeah, I think so. Murfreesboro to Shelbyville is just about 30 minutes.
Well, it depends on what side of the city you're in.
Well, I guess it can be.
But no, it's great. And, the community feel of it, I really like that, and getting out there and seeing customers and actually making an impact. When you're in a big bank, there's never a time I talked to a customer. There was never a time I was in a bank lobby.
Right.
And then, now we have that outreach and we have that relationship with our customers.
Yeah, it's better in person, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, Nicole, tell me a little bit about being a compliance officer and your department and what you guys do there.
Sure. So our compliance team there's 4 of us, so it's myself and 3 ladies who have been at the bank for a very long time. I think their average tenure is about 20 years. And they all started as bank tellers. I was a bank teller back in, the
That's how you
dark
work your
ages.
way up. Back in the dark ages. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you learn the business of banking. You learn how money moves and all of that. And then you build on all of the different skill sets within banking. And then once you hit the compliance area, we're really looking for just overall activity, and it's almost like a puzzle every day. To just go through that. And our compliance is separated to 2 parts, really. So there's the compliance aspects. There's a lot of regulations that the government puts on a bank.
Okay.
Making sure customers get the right disclosures when they open an account, or making sure we do all the right things when we have a mortgage. And there's regulations that are very, very specific on the compliance side. And then we have what we call the BSA side, which really focuses on money laundering. And all of that is really about looking at the activity that goes through an account to make sure that there isn't anything illegal going on.
Yeah.
So there's
plain and simple, right?
Right. And that could be either the customer doing it or the customer is a victim.
Right.
Whether, knowingly or unknowingly. So that's, our team is looking every day at activity to just make sure that, the bank is protected and that the customers are being protected.
Exactly. So we're talking a little bit about what you do in your department before the show. Mm-hmm. And what I gathered was exactly that. Like you guys' purpose is to protect the customer, probably first and foremost,
of course,
but also protect the bank, because you guys could be a victim as well. We don't think about that.
Yeah.
People could scam you.
Right. Well, and ultimately it's more of if the customer or an account loses money from a scam.
There you go.
And they can't cover that loss is going to hit the bank.
That's right.
We try to head things off, and we try to have controls in place that might seem like an inconvenience to some, but there's a reason for it. And when there is an unrecoverable loss, that's a loss to the bank, that's a loss to our shareholders, and ultimately we don't want to have that. We want to be able to provide services to our community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is all to protect everyone involved. So it's kind of like having law enforcement. Their job is to serve you.
Right.
And but protect the community as well. So you've got that at the bank in a way.
Yeah.
I found this interesting on the outline. It's talking about the arms that make up the compliance department. What do you mean by that? What are those different arms?
Yeah, I think kind of going along back to it's the team, how we are working towards the regulations and all of that, but then also with the money laundering aspects of it and looking at account activity. And then we reach out to our first line, our tellers, our banking reps, where they are kind of an extension of us a little bit, where we're giving them information. We're saying, we need you to do this. We need this type of information.
Okay.
And then they're the ones that kind of make things happen.
Okay.
And the bank. So, if it weren't for our front line, we wouldn't have the information that we need. We wouldn't have that customer outreach outlets. Okay.
So, you're touching all parts of it, so you can... Yeah. The tellers would be your feelers.
Yeah, definitely. They're they're the ones that have the most contact with our customers.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, what are some ways that you protect your customers? How do you find that unusual activity?
Sure. So on the compliance side of things, we get what's called alerts. Obviously computers are a lot faster and smarter sometimes than the rest of us.
Technology's great when it works.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So we get these alerts and things will come up that we want to take a look at on the compliance side. So we'll go through them. It might be a check looks wonky when it was imaged. And now that we have mobile deposit, please take good pictures of your checks when you're doing a mobile deposit.
Yeah, don't bump your hand as you're taking the picture. If it looks blurry, take another one, please.
So so sometimes, if a check looks wonky, it'll give us an alert. It'll give us an alert if a check is out of sequence. So what's important there is, if you think about it, we're all real trusting. We want to think that everybody's going to do the right thing. But what if you have your checkbook laying out on your table and you had a cleaning person, or you had a handyman through, or caregiver? Sometimes people will try and take one or two checks from the back, thinking you're not going to notice, and then they'll try and pass them through. Wow, okay. If checks aren't presented in sequence, it'll alert. Well, we all know that, I have a checkbook in my office and I have a checkbook at home. So my checks are almost always going to be out of some kind of sequence.
Well,
right?
I see, yeah.
Or if you have two people on an account, one might get one checkbook, one might get the other checkbook.
Yeah.
And then, but we on the compliance team, when we're looking at that, we'll look for those patterns, and we'll say, oh, well, this is why. But if we can't figure it out, we might give you a call and say, hey, we just want to make sure you wrote this check, especially if the signature looks off or something's different. So alerts really help us, and then we'll reach out and confirm with the customer.
Well, and from a consumer's perspective, from a customer perspective, I'm a busy person. Your customers are busy people. They're not going to take the time to think about this for you. So it's good that you're there, so that way you can watch for these things, and you can see these red flags. We might get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
For them, you can call them and say, "Hey, we're here for you. We've noticed something," and the customer is likely been caught up with life,
right?
Period. There's many different aspects of that that's always moving.
Yeah.
And it's like, I had no idea. Thank you for calling.
That's what we hope to hear.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it's not always perfect, but that is the purpose of this.
Yeah.
Well, before we go to break, what are some common red flags that you see? I know you talked about checks that are out of sequence.
Sure.
What else?
We see often like Cash App type transactions that maybe all of a sudden started, or linking your bank account to another bank account that maybe doesn't make sense. Like, why do you, as a resident of Shelbyville, want to link your bank account to a credit union in Utah that services teachers when you're not a teacher? That's not going to make sense, right? So we sometimes we'll think that that's a red flag, that somebody has maybe gotten into your account and is trying to link their account to yours.
Yeah.
We see large, unusual checks come through, and we see some strange wires or credits or debits even from your account from entities that just don't make sense. Like, if you're an individual, why would you be getting a credit from something that says there's somebody sending it to a business?
Yeah.
So we look at all of that type of activity. Cash activity is a big red flag. We always look at that,
especially if there's a lot of it. You're just looking for unusual activity. I think basically the key word here is unusual.
Definitely.
Things that don't add up, and the illusion I had was, or the picture I had rather, was like you've got a bunch of dots and you're connecting them, and then all of a sudden you have some in a completely different color, way out in left field, and there's no way to get from here to here and make sense.
Right.
And that's what you're looking for.
Definitely. We look at those outliers and try to make sure that sometimes there's a good explanation, but we just want to always be on the safe side and ask the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, this is the Financial Update with First Community Bank right here on Hopkins Farms Broadcasting. We're going to take a short break and be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you been looking for a way to support your local schools and organizations without dipping into your own pockets? Then listen up. Since 2017, First Community Bank has been donating 3 cents for every swipe made on an FCB debit card to teachers, classrooms, sports teams, and organizations of each customer's choice. Those swipes have added up to over $100,000, and it's so easy to get involved. Just use your First Community Bank debit card for everyday purchases and watch the donations roll in. Don't know how to set it up? Give us a call at 931-684-5800, and we'll help you get started. Let's make a difference, one swipe at a time. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender. And don't forget about the Moore County Branch's 20th Annual Chili Day, Tuesday, November 5th from 11 to 2 at 535 Majors Boulevard in Lynchburg.
You're listening to the Financial Update with First Community Bank. Now, back to the show. And we're right back here with you on the Financial Update with First Community Bank. I'm Chase Clanton, your host, and I am joined today with the Executive Vice President, BSA Compliance Officer, Nicole Simmons. And we've been talking about their compliance department and exactly what they do. But we want to talk about now, I want to ask you, what can customers do actually to help this process?
Yeah, I think if most importantly is if you keep your information up to date,
Okay.
make sure we have your good address on file, because sometimes we're going to try and, reach out to you, and if we're sending you a letter and it doesn't find you, or if we're trying to call you because we see something right away. I mean, yesterday I had an issue and I was trying to work on it like right away just to make sure that this customer didn't lose out on about $5,000. And
Wow.
the phone numbers I had, the first two that were at the top of the list, they were not good numbers.
Oh, no.
So fortunately, I was able to go a little deeper, and I found another number on a different account that they had. But if you just make sure we have a way to reach you, because if we see something, we want to make sure you know. And then just cooperate. The tellers are really just trying to do their jobs every day, and if they ask you for an ID, or if they, ask to confirm information like what's your occupation, please just tell them. Because, if I have a waitress who's depositing cash every week, I'm not going to be as concerned, because I'm going to think, well, that's probably tip money, a couple $100 here or there. Or if I know it's someone who's a cleaning person,
Yeah.
and, they may get paid in cash, I'll be able to figure that out. But if all of a sudden I start seeing a lot of cash coming in from someone who doesn't make any sense, I'm going to have to ask some questions. I might have to give you a call and ask, what's the source of this? Where is this coming from? So if you can just cooperate as a customer, we're not asking because we're trying to be nosy. We're just trying to have enough information that we don't have to ask you questions. We'll have a good picture.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe check in with your bank and make sure that your address, phone number, and your occupation are up to date.
Yeah, those are great things.
And I want to come back to that. Like, you're not trying to incriminate anybody when you're asking for their ID.
Right.
You're just making sure all your bases are covered so everybody's on the up and up.
When I go to the teller line, I work there.
Yeah.
I usually put my ID in my pocket in case they ask for it.
So you've got it at the ready.
Because I have it. Because sometimes we have new faces, on the teller line. They may not have met me yet.
And it's not personal.
Exactly. So if I'm willing to put my ID on the counter, it's just one of our precautions.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you work there. They should know you.
And they generally do. But like I said, there have been times where I work remote on Mondays.
Okay.
And our new people generally start on a Monday. Right?
Okay.
So I meet the new tellers, specifically our frontline staff, and do some one-to-one training with them on red flags and all these things. But that's usually about 2 to 3 weeks in from their training, from when they first start.
Right.
It's like give them a good feel for what's going on at the bank in their actual job before I, layer on more information. But in that first couple of weeks, if I happen to show up at their window, they're not going to know who I am.
Yeah, there's been a lot of information to take in.
Yeah.
So my point is, if you have your ID on you, don't be offended.
Exactly.
If you're asked for it, because this stuff is all for your good.
Yes.
I made the comparison before we went on the show. It's kind of like Big Brother, but it's not. It's more like a concerned aunt.
Exactly.
That's what you said.
Yes.
Yeah. It's all done out of love for your customer and protecting yourself.
Definitely.
Well, let's talk about some scams and stuff you have. Actually, before we do that, we made a point to mention not giving out your online banking information.
Yes.
Now, how does that look? Because you can connect that with different apps like, say, Venmo, or, lots of different other institutions, middlemen like PayPal, stuff like that. What exactly are you talking about there?
So there's a couple different ways that can happen. So if a customer has online banking, and you go into your computer and you put in your password and username and all that, and then you can see all of your banking on your computer. Occasionally, you'll get a scammer who is trying to get you to accept deposits and then send them some money out of that, out of a convenience, and there's a whole process involved in that. But once you give them any of your login information, because a lot of times they'll also say, well, I can help you. Just tell me what it is, and I'll log in on my side and make sure I see the same thing. And once you give them that information, they are able to basically take over your account. And
they can do whatever they want.
And they're not just going to take your money out. They might be taking money out from other victims, putting it into your account
to funnel it,
and then having you either come to the bank and take cash, and then maybe go to a Bitcoin machine and feed them the cash. There's all these, processes involved. Or they can even take the money out of your account and put it to another account. But once you get yourself in the middle of that, depending on whether you knew what was going on or you didn't, you may now become liable and potentially, have some legal ramifications for helping funnel or launder money. And you think you're doing the right thing. You think you're helping somebody that you maybe met online and you've developed a friendship with, or even maybe an online romance.
Yeah.
And you think you're talking to, someone who's maybe in the military, and they give you this whole backstory of...
That was a new one on me.
Yeah.
I have not heard of that yet.
I have seen it at least a half a dozen times in my time at the bank.
Really? And here locally? Like people have been victims of that locally here in Shelbyville?
Well, I wouldn't use the word victim, because we do try to intercede. So they have had, this experience, whether they've lost any money or not. We do generally get involved enough early on that we try to head off loss.
Right. Or somebody has attempted.
Yeah. Okay. And they'll send you photos. They'll send you videos. They might even FaceTime you.
I guess so.
There was one woman who told me that she met the person in real life when they were passing through on their way to the next base.
Wow.
And they had lunch. And so she knows he's real.
Wow.
Yeah. So, the scammers go to no end. But kind of back to that point of linking your account, once you let your account be part of that process, you may or may not have legal ramifications. And we call those money mules.
I was going to say, this sounds like money mules.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what that's called. So, especially if we talked about... if you're wittingly doing it, like better, maybe it's happened before, and something's up, but yet you continue on for whatever the reason is, whether you're actually intentionally stealing per se or not. If something's up and you continue on, you could be held liable. So please be vigilant and objective.
Definitely. Yeah, there have been people that have gone to jail. Not that I've known or, but I think we were talking a little bit about some of the morning programs where they have talked through or shown, these scenarios. I saw one where, there was a woman crying and a video story from out of Chicago, and she was being charged with federal money laundering crimes. And she was a money mule, and it was a romance scam. So you just don't know. You just really have to be careful. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Right.
And if anyone ever asks you to put money in a Bitcoin machine, it's probably a scam.
That's another red flag.
Yeah, definitely.
The more dominoes that are in the process, the more you should be sketched out by it.
Definitely. Yeah, I wish there were warning signs on all of Bitcoin machines, because once you
why are you here?
Once you put money into that machine, it's like playing the slots in Vegas. It's gone.
It's gone. Wow.
Yeah, we're not going to get that money back. Or if you go and you buy gift cards and you read the numbers, scratch them and read the numbers to someone, or you take pictures of them scratched off, that's gone. That is so gone.
Yeah.
And we can't help you there. So
now that's unfortunate. I have to ask a practical question. Where are the Bitcoin machines anyway?
So there's a lot of them in some of our gas stations. Just like, how you can find ATMs out in gas stations and such. A lot of them have Bitcoin machines. Now, they're not the ones operating them generally, but they lease a little space on the floor.
But they're there.
They're there. And they could have very legitimate use. I know some people enjoy using, investing and using Bitcoin,
Sure.
or they think it's a way to have untraceable funds, and that's important to them. But the scammers want those untraceable funds too.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you're helping somebody, I would already be cautious at door one there, if you will.
Right.
But if you're helping somebody and they start wanting untraceable funds, and they're pitching you a story. And we talked about grooming as well. Sometimes people just strike up a random friendship with you for months, even 6 months, maybe even a year, maybe longer. Who knows?
Definitely.
Depending on how committed to this bit they are.
Yeah.
And they could drag this on before the ask.
Exactly. And it can even come from just a random text message that looks like it was a wrong number. I don't know about you, but my grandma, when we would get a phone call in the house, and if it was the wrong number, she wouldn't just hang up. She would be like, oh, well, who are you calling for? No, this is the Maselli house. And she might talk to that person for a couple of minutes before she hangs up the phone. And I think some people, especially our older generation who might have a little more time or maybe be a little kinder about that,
Sure. Yeah.
will respond to those random text messages and say, no, this is so-and-so.
Start giving out information.
And then that's how it starts. Because if you're lonely and someone wants to talk to you, you might just respond.
Exactly. So I think it's important also to know what your weaknesses are. And that can be tough. But if loneliness, okay, let's just be frank, if that's one of your things, please still be vigilant.
Definitely.
Because people will try and attack that because that's a vulnerable spot that you have.
Yeah.
Well, that is fantastic. This has been a very informative show because I didn't know half this stuff before we started talking about it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else you want to touch on? We're just about out of time.
I would just say, family, make sure that you are checking in with your elder family to make sure, that everything is okay. It's always a good idea to have another person maybe on your account that we can reach out to that's not someone that can control any money, but more of a contact. So if we can't reach you and we have some big concerns, that maybe there's a trusted person you have that you say we can call. Because we want to, privacy is a big concern. Right. But if you tell me it's okay to call my brother or okay to call my daughter, if you see something's going on, we will do that. And then we'd much rather have, your family or your trusted person working with you to avoid some of these scams. Because sometimes we just get wrapped up and we want to believe, but if somebody else that we know and trust will start asking some questions, then the light bulbs kind of show and you're thinking, that doesn't make sense. You're right. Mm-hmm. And then, I always say I'd rather have someone either be mad at me or be upset we called a family member than come crying later that they are now out money.
Now we're in a crisis, and there's nothing much we can do.
Yeah, we try. There are some avenues, but it's usually a very low success rate once money has been given off to the bad guys.
Well, Nicole, that's why you're in the prevention business.
That is why I'm in the prevention business.
That's it. Well, Nicole Simmons, thank you so much for joining me today on the Financial Update.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. So this has been the Financial Update with First Community Bank. For myself, Chase Clanton, and for my guest, Nicole Simmons of First Community Bank, thanks so much for listening. We will see you next time.